Welcome to Uncanny X-Minutes, where we bring you the comics behind the movies. I'm Stasha.
I'm producer James.
And this is minute 70 through 80? Is that right?
That sounds right.
Okay, great.
And today we have a guest.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, my name is George. I'm from Chicago. That's, a pretty decent sized city, I think.
Yeah, people may have heard of it.
I think so. We're up and coming.
George is one of my friendly experts.
I try to be. That's a lot of. I see what you did there, but also, but for me, it's like a lot of pressure now. I have to.
No, see, we've already established that no one can truly know everything about X-Men.
No, that's fair.
It is too big. It's too wide. It is a universe in itself.
Yes, it is.
But these 10 minutes, we have planned time with Magneto. Wolverine and Jean kiss. Ooh. Mystique seduces Wolverine right after it, so a lot of shenanigans I didn't watch with my children. And then the Weapon X facility is infiltrated by Wolverine? ? We'll find out next episode.
But yeah, definitely.
Most likely. The funny thing about Mystique seducing Wolverine, at this moment, I feel like Wolverine, like in comic book history when this movie was released, Wolverine and Mystique didn't really have much of a history together.
I think it comes later.
I think it's written 5 years later or something like that.
They've had a sexual relationship by that point.
Oh.
Yeah, I want to say it was, here's my nerdy card, putting it right here on the table. X-Men in the early 50s, after 51.
I thought you were about to say the 50s, the 1950s. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to retract that.
Something Conundrum. The storyline, okay. It was Larry Hama. Mark Silvestri was still on the book. It was right before Image.
Okay.
And he left the mansion. Jubilee followed him, and Jubilee saw that he was at a motel. Mm-hmm. And then Jean Grey comes out, looking like she just had some good times. Uh-huh. And Jubilee was confused. And then when Jean Grey goes back into the room, you see that it's Mystique. And she's kind of like playing on his fantasies.
Sure.
Just
like in this movie.
Exactly. He's saying, can you not look like that? And she's like, well, I thought you would like it. So I know they had been.
Okay. So there has been.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Point, yeah. I want to say it was Conundrum, something.
The Crunch Conundrum?
Crunch Conundrum. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. The Crunch. I knew it started with the C. I was thinking Continuity Conundrum or something like that. The Crunch Conundrum.
That sounds like a whole different story. The Continuity Conundrum.
Mojo's a part of it as well, so it's Spiral.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is actually right before what we're talking, what I think we talked about, which is a little bit later, which is this is issue 51 of Wolverine.
Okay.
Volume 2, 51. Mm-hmm. For us, issues
do
that we
do you have a date for that?
I want to say it was 91, 92.
It is 91 and 92.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then the issues that we're going to talk about, me and James talked about, is actually the issue Wolverine, and that is 62 to 65, which is a little bit later. But I think
this is volume 2, though.
Yes.
So he's talking volume 1.
No.
Is it still the same
volume?
Really?
2,
yeah.
No. So again, because Marvel has relaunched quite a bit.
Sure.
I think it is a different. It's not in the same volume, but the one you guys are talking about is Get Mystique, right? By Chris and Aaron.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is, I want to say it's not even volume 3. It might be 3 or 4, because it's
volume 3, number 62.
Yeah. Volume 3. Okay. So the next.
So yeah, I was going to say I thought it was quite a bit later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that set of issues gives their past a little. It fleshes it out a bit, and it specifically the eras before the X-Men. Yeah. Neither one are messed up with the X-Men or the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. It is just the two of them. It's one of those where they're telling a story from the past, but they're also telling a story that's currently happening. And the part in the past is basically Mystique and Wolverine meet each other in Mexico at a firing squad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's a good meet cute, right?
What a great...
Is that what the kids are saying?
It is a meet cute if you're Wolverine and Mystique.
A mutant cute.
It's actually really interesting because Logan in that run, I feel like Logan comes off they kind of frame him as much more gruff and tough. So that issue kind of flashes between 1921 and quote unquote present day in Afghanistan, where he's chasing down Raven.
Because she backstabbed. She betrayed the X-Men.
Yeah, it was during Messiah Complex.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Birth of the baby, things are going down. Cyclops sends Wolverine to murder Raven. It is like unequivocal. He literally says it in the comic issue. So like it's kind of flashing back and forth. And in their meet cute, you kind of see Logan as like a much more rough and tumble guy. Everybody who's listened to this podcast knows that I'm a latecomer to a Wolverine fandom. If it was before Wolverine and the X-Men, I wasn't interested in Wolverine. And this is kind of reading like that Wolverine, you know, where he's like a jerk, he's mean, they're both mutants, he gets out of it, and she's like, you know, they're about to get shot, he does a bunch of stuff to, you know, not get shot, basically, attacks the people that were shooting them. And she's like, how'd you know I was going to set myself free before they shot? And he's like, I didn't, you know. And then she follows him. She's like, can I like, you know, basically go with you? I'll take you to Kansas City, et cetera, et cetera. It starts the whole interactions between the two. But like, I don't know. Like, it's very interesting because in the same issues, Wolverine is like kind of like he's been at this point already like with Jubilee and like been that kind of like paternal figure. And then obviously in the solo issues, Wolverine's going to come off a lot different, right? Because like that's what they're playing. But it was a little bit jarring for me.
They also jump ahead a little bit more where they're running grifts, and there's Mystique's got a crew of just like con artists and swindlers, and they're going to make one big score, you know, and then we're going to retire. And this sort of parallels what's happening in the modern day stuff too. But like he ends up calling the police, like informing the police this is going to happen. So he double crosses her, but then she was ready to double cross him, and neither one is happy, and they just go their separate ways. Their history is just a bunch of double crosses. Yeah. Like they should never trust each other, but they keep getting in situations where they kind of need to.
Is it too recent to talk about 2023 comics? Can we disclaimer?
I'd say anything before Fall of X.
Okay, great. Right. So in
is there a reason you don't want to spoil things?
Not everyone's caught up. I feel like
I try to give a little bit of a buffer at least to like what's on Unlimited. So like people who are keeping up that way.
Yeah.
But I do want to say in one of the comics, it was like an Avengers crossover one. But there is an explanation as to like Wolverine is being shot by Mystique. He's there dying. She's trying to kill him. The same old. And
it's their foreplay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the question, because like Wolverine asks her, he's like, he's bleeding out. He's like real bad shape. And he's like, I don't even remember how we met. He's like, we've been doing this thing. We've always been stuck in each other's craw, quote unquote. And he's just like, I don't even remember how this even started. And she's like standing over him with a gun. And she's like, I do. I remember every moment of it. And her reasoning is basically that they're the same person, except that life has decided to give Logan lemonade and she's holding the lemons, quote unquote. And so she's effectively just like finds it kind of jealous and thinks that it's really unfair that her and Wolverine are basically the same type of person, but he gets to be this like hero and have a family and be part of the X-Men, and she's kind of on the outs and has like the rougher life.
Maybe she should stop double crossing people. Like, I mean, stop being a terrorist. Really,
to an extent, I do see that. But on the other hand, like Wolverine is usually the one being manipulated, and Mystique is usually the one doing the manipulating.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So she probably gets into trouble because she keeps trying to manipulate people, and sometimes gets in trouble due to that.
Yeah. I mean, not her first appearance, but her first appearance in the Uncanny X-Men, she's planning the assassination of Senator Kelly. So guess what?
Well,
guess who didn't do that?
I mean,
it wasn't Logan.
She's one of those characters that gets more interesting as time goes on, when people can write a little bit more and be like, yeah, but, you know, so.
I do think, and we talked about this in actually the very first episode with her and Rogue as like a mother figure. I feel like that aspect of her has always been interesting, and I'm glad that that's carried through to the modern day. But
just not in this movie. Is it this 10 minutes where she literally talks to Nightcrawler?
Yeah, and doesn't like.
And there's nothing there.
I know, it's crazy, right?
All he asks is, "Why don't you look normal?" And she's like, "Why should I have to?"
Yeah.
I think this is the first because X-Men came out before Spider-Man. Like this was the first.
This one came out after the first
like.
one.
This was. It felt like to me. At that time when X-Men came out, this was the studios taking comic books more seriously.
Yes.
I mean, we can talk about Blade if we want to, but that wasn't marketed as a comic book movie.
Yeah.
It was a horror movie.
Nobody realized till after the fact that
exactly.
it was a
so
Marvel movie.
it's not a fair, to say like let's talk about Blade or Batman was before it, and that effectively killed comic book movies. Batman and Robin.
I was gonna say too many Batman movies.
Well, and also the bat skates and the bat nipples, all of that.
Like, the Joel Schumacher.
Yeah, exactly.
Quick aside, I love those movies. I love the camp. I really love the camp, but I understand.
I mean, you're also a little younger than us too, and I loved Forever, but I was a huge Jim Carrey fan.
Oh yeah.
So I liked the camp of 3, but 4 was too much for me.
Oh, I guess I was younger and I was just like a kid, and I was like, this is hilarious. Like the camp really landed for me.
You're not wrong.
So when X-Men came out, I don't think they were thinking in terms of let's dig into the lore.
No.
Let's just have these characters on screen. They changed quite a few of them to fit. I mean, they put them in leather uniforms. They were afraid to show them as more comic book characters than they already had.
Yeah.
At that point, with
we won't get colored
laser eyes and stuff.
We won't get colored costumes for quite a few more, like 2 more movies.
Yeah. I understand, but it is still hard to watch going back, like but if this is what it took to get an X-Men movie, I'll
baby
take
steps.
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
X-Men walked so Avengers Infinity War could run.
Fly.
Yeah, could fly, exactly, and shoot lasers out of its butt.
Yeah.
Now, Icarus also shoots laser out of his eyes.
Oh, does he? Yeah. Oh, look at that.
But he's an Eternal and no one cares about him.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw down that gauntlet.
Yeah,
I think there's
disagree.
nobody's picking up that.
Not at this table. This table, we're like, you're right.
Yeah.
The other thing I would love to discuss is both how Magneto recruits mutants, and this goes tandem a little bit with it, is the X-Men working with quote-unquote evil mutants.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean X-Men working with evil mutants?
Well, like this movie is them teaming up with the Brotherhood to fight another set.
Oh, I see.
All of Krakoa, it became like we're working with the quote bad guys.
Yeah.
But we're all one because we're all still mutants.
Right.
Yeah.
I got to say, I've been reading a lot of Silver Aged X-Men, and those early issues are all about like recruiting mutants.
Yeah,
and they keep not like in the first. I've read the first like 8 or 9 issues, and it keeps like ending with not recruiting the mutant.
Who do you have? You have Blob by that point.
You've got Eunice the Untouchable, and then you also have Namor. They both tried recruiting Namor. And I think that's
that in the issue where Magneto takes off his helmet, and it in the captions it reveals like he's the second most powerful mind, right? He
absolutely. I don't even think he takes off his helmet. I think he just sits down and then his astral projection. They don't call it astral projection. It's his mental image.
Yeah.
Goes and finds Namor. So it's a mental a Magneto and a mental Professor X looking for Namor under the sea.
Yeah, they just threw everything at the wall.
Magnets, man.
Magnets, bro.
Magnets. But if you put them in the water, according to Trump, like they'd stop working. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's his weakness. I've always said Magneto's weakness is
water. Yeah. So
like the Wicked Witch of the West.
So part of the reason that we brought you on today, George, is that you have really strong opinions about Magneto and Professor X.
Yeah, I do. And it's mostly, it's not that I have strong feelings about them personally, which I mean I do, but it's more
it's not what the emails you send me.
Yeah, exactly. it's more the fandom's reaction to them, because one I want to say I'm more liberal, progressive leaning.
Yeah, you read X-Men.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's part of the another thing.
You know what's going on in X-Men.
But currently there are a lot of fans, if we want to call them that read X-Men, and they are upset by how certain politics are played out in the books. Now they're like, oh, X-Men was never woke, which they're not wrong when they say X-Men was never woke.
They didn't start woke.
Yes. So my quibble is that there's a certain segment of fandom that says Professor X is Martin Luther King Jr. and Magneto is Malcolm X. And that's just not true in any way, shape, or form. I don't care what you've read on the internet. I don't care. I think there's even a Stan Lee article or like he wrote something, or he wrote something and said, yeah, and it's like he's lying, like bold-faced, he's lying. It
could have been like sort of it's in the news, it's in the air, and it may have through osmosis sort of came out, but I don't think it was intentional, but in such a way that he wanted to put the politics on the page.
Even with that, again, you say I'm the quote unquote expert, and I do try to read up a lot on comic book history more than anything else. If you read a lot about Stan Lee, if you ignore his hucksterism, if you ignore his, he's
a salesman, man.
Yeah, absolutely. P.T. Barnum, he's up there, selling comics. If you ignore, he was a company man. Yeah. He towed the line. There's nothing you can tell me that would convince me to believe that he wrote that intentionally or subconsciously. Mostly because he didn't write it. And what I mean by that, Jack Kirby created all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Marvel way, right? Yeah. Like, do you want to explain what that means?
At one point, Stan Lee was writing so many books that it's called the Marvel method, where the artist essentially plots the book, writes the book, and Stan Lee looks at the pages that the artist turns in, and he dialogues it. That's all he was. He dialogued the book.
He was a dialoguer.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean he didn't help co-create them and flesh them out.
Of course.
So with that in mind, Jack Kirby fought in World War II. I can believe that Jack Kirby had those elements in it, had the oppression in it, because woke as a concept did not exist in the 60s. It wasn't what it is now. It
was called civil rights at the time, I think is what you mean.
But also Magneto as Malcolm X, like that, it wasn't possible at that point.
Yeah. Right.
Because one, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they weren't portraying him as that. He was a mutant supremacist. Nazi. Right. Sorry.
Yeah.
And that's what he was. Like, he would say, it's our turn to rule. We are better. We are homo superior. He coined the term, if I'm remembering correctly.
That is correct.
He coined that term, superior. We are your evolutionary better, and we are going to take over the world. That sounds very much like a certain ideology that we are fighting against right now.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a disservice, one, to Magneto and the character he eventually becomes, to say that he was a Malcolm X character, and a disservice to Malcolm X himself.
You're right.
And a disservice to Claremont, who more than a decade later is who introduced this concept of Magneto being a Holocaust survivor.
Right.
And that was in 1981 with Uncanny X-Men 150. That's almost 20 years later.
Yeah.
By that point, I brought an interview that is by Claremont, because he's the one that introduced these elements to Magneto. And
he's the one with the nuance. Like, he's the one that fleshed out these characters. He is what created, I mean, we've said it before, and I'm going to say it again.
Yeah.
He's the one who created modern day X-Men.
Yes,
just
absolutely.
a factual statement. Yeah.
Without
when you
him,
think Claremont, when you think X-Men, you're thinking Claremont most of the time. I would say most people.
I don't know if I said this before, but I did read a post someone made, was like, oh, I tried reading Silver Age X-Men and it was very old fashioned and slow. It's like, yeah, that's why no one goes back and reads those.
Yeah.
Except for us.
Well, if you follow our TikTok, I have been doing 1 minute rundowns of what each one of the issues is.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you don't need to read the whole thing. Here's the bullet points, essentially.
Yeah.
1 minute long.
Yeah.
So let's hear this interview.
And I'm sorry, I should have also brought the source where I got this from. But the interview, and I'll hopefully we can link that or something.
Yeah.
You know, the interviewer asks, the aspect of the X-Men that has always intrigued me and has always resonated the most with me, and I'm sure other readers, is that they're a metaphor for any persecuted minority. If you ask who's the greatest X-Men adversary, Batman has the Joker, Superman has Lex Luthor, and the X-Men have prejudice. Also, I've always loved how the essence of the book, at least when you were writing it, was the difference in philosophies between Professor Xavier and Magneto. I've heard different takes on this, and I really wanted to ask you, was it always your intention, or your intention at all, to make the two metaphors for Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? And were you going to?
I was just going to say, this is from Christ Coffee and Comics.
Okay,
interview.
Thank you. Chris Claremont's response was, I'll take it back even further. The metaphors I was thinking were more along the lines of Menachem Begin. It's spelled begin, but I'm sorry if I apologize if I'm butchering his last name, and his predecessor. It was a blended metaphor. Originally, I was thinking of the Israeli dichotomy rather than the civil rights dichotomy in the States, but they're both equally valid.
I also feel like that's doubled down when the opening of the Krakoan era of X-Men starts in Israel.
Yes.
It's like obviously pulling that comparison from Claremont too. Yeah.
And to me, it's why I do think Magneto is a fascinating character. But again, with fandom and with what Grant Morrison ended up attaching to his character was when Magneto was quote unquote killed in Genosha, the kids took up a slogan, Magneto is right. Have you
Magneto
come around?
was right. Yeah.
But my issue with that is I vehemently disagree with that. For me, Magneto is wrong. I don't know how you guys feel about what's going on in the Middle East right now. But for me right now, how the Israeli government is responding and is killing 35,000 Palestinians, the sentiment behind that is never again, but it's never again for them, while at the same time committing genocide. You know? That's why I think Magneto right now accurately represents that. He suffered great loss, and we can't fault him for that. But the way he's gone about doing it has not only hurt the humans that have been responsible for some of his pain and suffering, and mutants' pain and suffering in general, but people that had nothing to do with the conflict. And one of the things that I was really quick to research today that I had to was in X-Men 25, adjective list. I hope I'm saying
that. That's right.
Where
Vanilla X-Men.
Yeah, Vanilla X-Men. Just plain old X-Men. It's the issue where Magneto rips out Wolverine's adamantium claws.
Oh, yeah.
From Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction.
And in the beginning of that, the U.S. government and all of the governments of the world realized that he's back, that Magneto's back. They thought he was dead. So they enact the Magneto protocols. And essentially, it's a shield around the Earth. And Magneto was on his asteroid M. And it's a shield around Earth that if Magneto ever comes into the Earth's atmosphere, it would weaken him. He wouldn't have his powers, that's all it really says in the book. Because the book doesn't really explore that because of what Magneto does. And Magneto goes into this energy mesh and it creates an EMP. And it goes all over the world. And the book downplays it by saying, hundreds of people die, possibly thousands. That's a conservative number.
Right.
If you really think about an EMP going off and affecting the whole world, and that is why I feel that he's wrong, because you have an oppressed minority that's affecting another oppressed minority worldwide. And what I mean by that is when global catastrophes happen, what type of people get affected disproportionate more than others? That's either poor people and people of color.
Yep.
So when you have this EMP go around the whole world, taking out all of Earth's electronics, you've got people that can't, that could barely afford their pacemaker. You have people that are in hospitals in Africa, in South America, that are on ventilators. They are now dead because of what he did. And your oppression should not affect their oppression. And it becomes a game of like, who's is bigger.
Right,
with oppression,
Yeah.
That's why I feel that he's wrong.
And I think, like, even if you go into the metaphor of even Professor X being MLK, MLK was nonviolence. Like that was his big thing, was nonviolence. Professor X does not do nonviolence. He does tactical strikes with children, soldiers.
But one of MLK understood violence and the reasons why. Like, he might have been, I don't know enough to be able to be like, this is him, this is what he did. But he said riots are the voice of the unheard. So he knew.
Right. But
so
Professor X is specifically throwing soldiers at the problems.
Yeah. And the other thing that I would like to point out, which is an interesting situation, X-Men started off not necessarily as a peaceful coexistence. There was aspects of that in it.
Yeah.
But it was more than anything else to protect humans from evil mutants.
Yes. At the beginning, yeah.
At the very Silver Age beginning.
That's interesting.
That is very interesting. It is definitely one of those they had to write and rewrite out because it doesn't fit well with everything else that's going on.
I mean, but it does and it doesn't, because even nowadays you see when there is a certain crime perpetuated or perpetrated by a certain minority group, that minority group does get like, hey, who are you? You're white or you're black. You can't comment on our community. There is a certain amount of that aspect. And so that's why I said it's interesting, but not necessarily wrong, because you hear comedians all the time, like especially African-American comedians saying, oh, black Twitter is different than regular Twitter. Mm-hmm. So they have their community and they have their own opinions, and that they feel that nobody else can speak on it, Yeah. It's just a fascinating point of interest that X-Men didn't start off that way. They started off policing their own to safeguard, humans. And so we could play nice and we could assimilate,
Right.
Mm-hmm. I also think that I think it's not surprising that some of Magneto's most heroic aspects has been in the Krakoan era, where he has been removed from dealing with humans, really.
Yeah.
Like, for the most part, except for like literal evil corporations or whatever that are infringing upon Mars, which becomes his territory, or Arakko, if we're going to call it how it should be, and becomes this heroic figure. He is kind of separated from that kind of collateral damage, from the ability to do that. He just does, you know what I mean? They've really separated him from that, and I think it makes him more heroic by kind of removing his ability to do those things, because like, as a character, you're right, he will just do them. There's no reason for him to hesitate. So the writers have put him on a different planet.
But there's two podcasts that I listen to that I absolutely love, and they really delve into this. Jay and Miles Explains the X-Men.
Love them.
Absolutely.
Love them. And they actually recently went over one of my favorite comic book issues of all time, and it had to do with Magneto, and that was right before the Magneto War. Have you listened to that episode?
No, I haven't.
It's written by Joe Kelly and art with Alan Davis. Alan Davis.
Alan Davis is great.
And the issue, I love this issue. For me, it's one of the examples why I hold up to Magneto's wrong. In that issue, you have two stories going on. One, X-Men are trying to rescue some babies in a hospital. The hospital is burning, and Professor Xavier is trying to, like, is the dream worth fighting for at this point? Is this a losing battle? But the Magneto story is the story that I love the most, and in it, there is a insurance. I want to say an insurance inspector, because he goes onto this construction site, and the building was just flipped upside down. Like, literally, that's what happened. And he's thinking to himself, I don't know what happened. And sure enough, Magneto shows up as, I forgot who he's maybe he's playing the inspector, whereas the guy is the construction foreman. Thank you. And he's asking him these questions. He's like, could this have been work of a mutant? And the foreman is like, I don't know. I can't tell you. He's like, do you think one of your people, one of your workers is a mutant and could have caused this? He's like, you're asking me to blame one of my workers, and that's not something I'm going to have. Like, no, that's not. And all the time, Magneto's prodding this guy, and he's using this one guy as a test. And he's going to use that test as a justification to do what he's going to end up doing. And he is putting this guy through his paces so that he wants this guy to prove Magneto himself right. But he's not falling into his traps. He's like, well, what if it's Magneto? What if this monster mutant threatens to kill your family, what would you do then? He's like, that's not a fair question, because you're asking how I would react when you're attacking people that I love. Of course, I'm gonna respond accordingly. Like, that's not fair. And he ends up saying, like, it's kind of like that old question: would you kill Hitler as a baby? Mm-hmm. And Magneto's the wrong person to ask that to. So Magneto reveals himself to be Magneto, and he goes off. He has a grand display of his powers, and he really scared this guy. He's saying, like, I would kill Adolf Hitler as a baby. To save millions of lives, I would kill this baby. And now that I've revealed myself to you, how do you feel? Like, are you scared? And he said, yes. He goes, do you want me dead? And he said, yes. He's like, see, you, and this guy's like crying. He's, of course, because he's scared. He sees Magneto in front of him. And then as he flies off, this guy kind of gets his bearings together, and he says, like, what you just did isn't fair. You came at me at a way of, how else was I supposed to react? I'm not afraid of you because you're a mutant. I'm afraid of you because you're a monster. Mm. And that line, you can see this face that Magneto has. He's like, oh, I messed up. But he's not going to tell him that. And this beautiful illustration by Alan Davis, and he just flies off, and then he starts, the Magneto War. But he knew what he wanted to do. And he wanted to prove himself right in some way, but he was proven wrong.
Right.
But he still forced the issue. He already had his mind made up. He knew what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what that guy said. And he set that guy up for failure.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. I can't remember what issue that was, but yeah.
Well, George, thank you. This was incredible. I'm so glad we did a deep dive on this, because I find it really interesting, because it's honestly, I think most people are very compelled by Magneto and Xavier and like their ideologies and how they've shifted and changed. And I think sometimes it's hard to keep track of it, if you're not reading all the issues. So this has like been extremely helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this is the end of the episode. I've been your host, Stasha.
I'm producer James.
And I'm George.
And we'll see you for the next 10.